welcome back to the Allegheny Northern in N scale, and they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So have I gone insane? Or what? You be the judge. You are looking at the Broadway Limited Imports T1 in the Chessie System Steam Special paint scheme. And I know you're sitting there thinking to yourself, wait a minute, there are two things wrong with this. One, you do not like Broadway Limited Imports, and you're right, I don't. And two, you said the big boy was the only steam locomotive you were going to buy, and so what the hell is this? And you're right again. So, that is why I asked the question, have I finally gone insane? And I have a reason for doing what I did, as most people usually do, and let me explain it to you and see if it makes sense. So, Chessie System, while it's not what I model, is probably one of my favorite railroads of all time. And you say, well, why didn't you model it? I don't know, actually. I ended up collecting a lot more Norfolk Southern stuff, and because it's what runs in the area, I sort of gravitated towards, realistically it was Conrail, but Chessie, I have a few pieces, but I never really bought a whole lot of stuff for it. And now that I look at it, it sounds kind of crazy, but Chessie itself with the paint scheme is just phenomenal. I think it's between the cat logo, and I'm not a cat person. It's dogs all the way for me, but the Chessie System symbol, the imagery that the railroad had, probably one of the better reach out to the public railroads that ever existed here in the United States. And there's just something about seeing those locomotives and that paint scheme, whether it was the diesels, the steam special, whatever, running through the mountains of Pennsylvania and West Virginia in the fall with the long coal drags, really, for me, was what American railroading was all about. That heavy industry, tough grades, and moving American power. So, always loved Chessie. Now, Broadway Limited, not so much love. And you guys know that my hatred started with their SD40-2s, which were a complete disaster for me. And I swore to never buy another Broadway Limited product ever again. So turned around and bought the Southern unit when they put that out, the Heritage unit, because, well, nobody else had it out on the market at the time, and I love that unit as well. And so, yeah, so I bought the Broadway Limited. And it ran beautifully. It's a great locomotive. It runs leaps and bounds better than the SD40-2 versions. So, okay, well, now we're going to try one of their steam locomotives. And when I bought this, it was not that I had sworn off buying steam locomotives, because I love my Cato Big Boy, but it was that it really doesn't fit my railroad, it doesn't fit my era. A lot of things don't make sense with this, but once again, going back to Chessie, liking Chessie, and this locomotive having an absolute beautiful paint scheme to it, well, here it is. So let's talk about, now that you understand where my insanity has started from, let's take a look at the actual model, and let's get into its operation and what it offers to you, somebody who may be less insane. Okay, so that was the startup sequence of the locomotive and giving you a little bit of direction to it so you could hear it kind of chuff along. One of the features of this locomotive that's not like any other is that it does have a steam smoke generator in it so that you can represent the smoke action as the train chugs along the track. And there's been, if you go on YouTube, there's a bunch of videos about, obviously it's got a pretty small tank, and the little pipette they give you really doesn't get it to where it needs to go, and they now sell a syringe that you can purchase to get a little bit closer. So we're not looking at the smoke feature today because I don't have the smoke fluid. But if you want to see that in action, there are plenty of videos online of it smoking, and you can check it out. So, I mean, it's a pretty cool feature, especially in N scale, because that's not something that we usually associate with the smaller scales. That's usually something that, like a Lionel type gauge is pretty good at. But, so cool feature if you're into that. And definitely a nice showpiece for those of you who have open houses and touring railroads. So, but let's take a look at the looks of it, and then we can go into the sounds a little bit more, and most importantly, which I'm sure you guys are going to be really interested in, is the operation of the locomotive itself. So I'm going to take you in my hand here and take you for just a brief overview. And I will tell you that from a detail standpoint, this is a beautiful locomotive, and it does have all these separately applied details. The locomotive's got some serious weight to it, which is based off of its die-cast chassis, which is also pretty cool. But just looking at the detail here, you do get very, very, very nice detail. I'm going to pull her forward here so we can look at the detail on the back, and then we'll bring her backwards so we can take a look at the detail on the front. You do get the directional lights, and of course this is the Rolling Thunder. That is their number 4 that you're listening to. So you do get the latest and greatest with this locomotive. All right, let's bring her backwards here. And yeah, you're getting a little sound demonstration while we do that. Okay, so the T1s are a 282 configuration, and they actually were rebuilt models from earlier 280s, and you can get a little more detail on these babies if you just do a quick Google search, because all of us train nerds have lots of information about them online, and you can see these ones, the chassis one in particular, you can see when it came online in the late 70s as a promotional gimmick to celebrate 150 years of railroading in the United States. And it's no surprise that this was an extremely popular event, and obviously folks flocked to the train to try to get tickets to ride it and at least to see it. Okay, so if you were riding this particular model, let's talk about how it would ride for you. Okay, a couple of things to note before we get into the operation of this model, and that is the sound. And the sound was good and crisp all the way around the layout. I had no dropouts. I had no issues. And I'm finding that with the steam locomotives, because they have the tender behind them and they've got an extra space for some decoders and some speakers, the steam locomotives do tend to get a little bit better sound than some of the diesel locomotives, which are very confined for space. So this one's no exception. The sound is good. It's crisp. It ran uninterrupted, and it did fine in its break-in period, which was roughly about 3 hours for this model. Forwards and backwards, I didn't have any derailment issues with it, so that was a major plus. And it didn't find any issues in my track work, which is also a major plus for a new locomotive. So from that standpoint, she ran very, very well. Now we get to the actual out-of-the-box operation. So when I took her out of the box, set her on the tracks, and turned her on, the motion was not smooth. It was abysmal. For those of you who were complaining about the jerkiness of the Scale Train's SD40-2s, you would have had a heart attack over watching this thing come out of the box. It smoothed out a little bit while it was running, but not to a point that I was satisfied with. And so I thought, well, there we go, just wasted my money on another Broadway Limited. But I gave it some time and let it do its thing, and kind of wanted to see what would happen. And you guys are thinking now, well, you violated your number one rule. You were judging the locomotive before it broke in. That thought was not lost on me, so I let it run so that I could see what it looked like broken in. So, like most of us, I went online to see what this little guy was getting in the reviews, and everybody absolutely loved it. In fact, only a few people actually commented on how jerky it was, although you could see in the video that the locomotive was not smooth running. And so, I try to avoid, falling in love with a manufacturer or falling out of love with a manufacturer would be the case, and judging their products based on that alone. So I want to, it's got to run, it's got to work, it's got to do what it's promised to do, because if it doesn't, then it's not really a good model. So, sometimes I saw some comments made in the videos and I thought, well, these people just really like this locomotive, and if this thing, blew up on their track, they would just be so excited to have one, they'd go get another one. So, I kind of tempered my opinion of what I saw online, and didn't see any quick fixes to adjusting, the jerkiness. So, I let it go through its braking period. And the other thing that I noticed, and was kind of a concern for me, was how slow it was. And that led me to think that, well, this thing must be binding. Maybe there's a bent rod somewhere on the drive wheels, and something's just stopping this motor from getting smooth running, and that wasn't it. I looked the model over backwards and forwards. Everything looked like it was in place, and everything looked like it was in alignment. Everything was moving freely, so there was no issue with it. So, okay, so next step. Why is it running so slow? Well, one only has to open up the settings of the CVs and realize that CV6, your mid-range, was set to a value of 50. And for those of you thinking 50, yes, 50. And most mid-ranges on locomotives are somewhere around 100, 120, depending on what you're doing with it. And that's just the natural speed curve of 0 to 128 and finally ending at 255. So that 50 was the answer. That's why the locomotive was running so slow. Even at 50% throttle, it's barely moving. And so the reason for that is when the decoder was programmed, they were going for maximum slow speed control, which... Okay, great. These locomotives topped out at about 65 miles an hour. So, it's pretty much a standard locomotive speed, and way faster than most of my freights would ever be traveling over the layout. So, I messed with those values a little bit, and then after messing with them, decided, you know what? It did operate best with the factory settings. So, using the factory settings is what you're going to see here today. So, you're going to have a mid-range of 50. You're going to have a max, I think it's around 200, 210. So it's not even the full 255. And the starting value is 1. And basically all that's doing is getting this thing kind of triggered to get started on that speed curve. So, okay, so that is the answer to the speed. And so when you take this thing out of the box, you put it on the layout, and it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere, that is because of that setting. If that bothers you, you can make the adjustment, although I highly recommend that you don't, because from my experience, it runs best with those factory settings. Okay, so let's go ahead and let this baby run around the layout, and I'll show you what she can do. Okay, that is a 3% throttle right there. And because of time, I'm not going to let you watch it go the whole layout at this speed. But it will. It'll just keep going. And sometime next week, maybe it'll get back to where it started. So for slow speed, not bad. All right, we're going to jump it up considerably here, and we're going to go to about 30% throttle. I don't know if it's perceptible in the camera, but you're kind of seeing how it jerks and bounces a bit. And so, what I wasn't sure of was it jerking and bouncing because of track work? The ultimate answer to that was no, not in most cases. When it hits a bump in the track that it doesn't like, you'll notice that. Because the whole train rocks, but for the most part, no, it's not that. There's a bit of a bounce to it. So we're gonna follow it here. The weird thing is, the drive wheels don't really seem to be missing a beat. It's almost like they're slipping. And so I've attributed that to some potential factory grease on the wheels. And so I'm going to let her run out and see what the deal is. And see if that improves. But you'll notice that the wheel motion is very smooth. So it's not like the wheels are stuttering or the motor is struggling. And as you can tell, the sound continues uninterrupted, which is definitely more than I can say for the SD40-2s. Okay, so I'm at about 50% throttle now, and you can see that at 50% throttle, she is not exactly galloping. But because of the settings on here, there is a pretty steep curve from 50% throttle on up, because it's got to get all the way from that setting of 50 up to, I believe it's 210, which is a real sharp curve. And so after a bit here, she's gonna take off. The nice thing is, with her weight and the traction tires, she stays on the tracks. So there's zero complaints about that. Forwards and backwards, no issue. So she rides well, and as you can hear, the sound is good, and it is continuous. And the other thing that I like is there's no random sounds playing. So if you recall from my SD40-2s, sometimes the random bell would get stuck or the horn would get stuck, and then you just had to listen to it, because the only way to shut it off was to take it off the layout and then put it back on, which was a pain. But as you can see, she's just kind of doing her thing. So operation wise, other than that jerky motion we're getting, she seems to be running pretty good. Now I'm gonna keep running her for a while here, and and let her work it. Let her work her shit out, so to speak, and see if she improves. And you may be asking yourself, well, why don't you just clean the wheels? Well, like I said, they do have a traction tire on here, and the nice thing is they do give you some spare traction tires. And so I didn't want to put the traction tires on or to clean it with those on, and I also wanted to see if I could just naturally get the wheels cleaned up, because she's running really good. So as far as connectivity goes, so that's not the issue. But let's do a load test and see how she pulls. Okay, we are doing the standard pull test. I've got 5 cars in tow. They've got brand new microtrains, trucks, and couplers on them, so they are going to be as free rolling as they'll ever be at this point. So we're trying to do a fair test here. Throttle's at about 30%, so it's at a crawl based on the current settings. As a reminder, this is a 2% grade that we're working up right now. And she's made it to the top. So let's bring her back down and see if we can throw one more car on there. Okay, 10 cars. And yeah, she'll do 10 cars. Okay, so it does perform very, very well on the pull test. I mean, I can keep adding cars here to see where it stops, but I think you get the idea that it's a good pulling locomotive. So it does get points for that. One thing I want to show you here on the sound is when you change sounds, or when you change speeds quickly, sometimes the sound doesn't know what to do. So I want you to listen in here. You hear how the chuffing kind of stopped, and all of a sudden, I mean, we're still making forward motion. I don't know if that's prototypical or not. It seems weird to me. So some of you guys that are Steam guys might be able to tell me that, but it seems to me that it should still be doing that. Once again, I'm sure you guys that are Steam guys would know. But it seems like when you touch the throttle, sometimes the sounds stop. So that seems like a little bit of a flaw to me. But once again, not a Steam guy. Don't know. Maybe the real ones do it. It just seems weird that it would all of a sudden go silent. And every time you heard that sound cut out, I was doing something with the throttle. So it wasn't like the sound was just cutting out. That was me adjusting the throttle, and then the sound cut out. Then it resumed on whatever it was doing. So not sure if that's the decoder, that's my sound, that's my Digitrack system, but something there seems out. So just keep that in mind as well. Okay, so the Broadway Limited T1 in the chassis system Steam Special. Let's talk about it. Great puller. I mean, you saw it. It pulled 10 cars up this 2% grade, no issue. So major points for that. Does have traction tires. It does have a die-cast body. So it's pretty rugged, pretty durable, pretty heavy. So it makes sense that it pulls well. Let's talk about the looks. This particular scheme, you can get it in some of the traditional schemes. I'll call them the boring schemes that are basically black. But in the chassis scheme, it is a beautiful looking model with the blue, the black, the orange and red, or the orange and yellow rather. So great looking model. Everything was crisp. The details are nice, and all of the separately applied details, very nice. So the locomotive, for looks, gets a 10 out of 10. That's right, 10 out of 10. I really enjoy the way this thing looks. Let's talk about operations. Pulling, really good, excellent. The sound stays on; it's continuous, except when you adjust the throttle. So that's a little funky. I can revise my opinion of the locomotive. You guys tell me no, it's supposed to do that, but it seems weird to me. So we're gonna take some half point off for that. The jerky motion, it might smooth out. It might not. I don't really know. So I can't give the locomotive full credit for good operation, because it's not smooth, and I feel like it should be smoother. So we've got to hit a point there for that. But otherwise, tracks very, very well, runs very well forward and backwards as far as staying on the rails and negotiating the turns. I think this one is capable of, I think it was all the way down to 9 3/4 radius, which is the tightest you can go. Mine's 11 is my tightest radius. Handles it well, no issues. I've been able to leave the locomotive basically alone while it was breaking in and go do other stuff in the layout and go upstairs, and it didn't have any issues. So very good on that as well. Okay, so with a 10 out of 10 on looks and an 8 out of 10, 8.5 out of 10, I guess, on performance. Roughly, this is a 92.5%er. Call it a 93%er for me. It may smooth out a little bit, so I'm not sure that it won't increase in its rating as time goes on. But yeah, this is actually a nice little locomotive from Broadway Limited Imports, and it doesn't mean I forgive them for their SD40-2s, but for this particular locomotive, she does run really nice, and you're going to see a lot more of her on the layout. And now I know you're wondering, what are you going to do with it? Well, I'm hoping somebody makes the passenger cars for Chessie that go with it, because that would be awesome. I'm sure they were made in the past, but I can't find them currently on the market, so it'd be cool to get a set of those. But in the meantime, you are going to see it in revenue service, and you are going to see it paired up with some Chessie diesel locomotives to provide some extra tractive effort. So don't be surprised if you don't see it in a consist with some coal trains here coming up in future videos. Hope this video was helpful to you, and as always, don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe on the way out, and feel free to leave any comments down below. I do read all the comments. Sometimes I get to address them, sometimes you just get a like. Depends on the comment and my timing. So feel free to leave comments and your experiences with this locomotive for other viewers to take a look at.